Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Katie Tyler and welcome to the Sociology Staffroom. I've got a guest with us. Hello, how are you?
Hello, hello, hello.
There we go. Brett, hello, how are you, first of all? And just tell us, first of all, we're going to be talking today about the sort of niche of theories and do we teach them, do we not teach them? How do we teach them? So before we explore all of that, tell me a little bit about yourself, sort of teaching background.
So I'm actually ECT one going into ECT two. I'm subject lead for sociology and politics, which is also known as head of department. Um,
Wow.
I Yeah, well, to be honest, having the autonomy has been quite nice. And I was actually under allocated in my hours, so it didn't feel like so daunting. Um, I've got an undergraduate in politics and a master's in international political economy, which is a fancy long name for politics. Um, and yeah, I did a little bit of research. So I'm glad we're talking about the Marxisms because I've done academic research in Marxist feminism. So that's like my groove. Um, yeah, that's me.
Wow. I feel like before we even talk about Marxisms and all this sort of, I say niche, I suppose it's just the nuances of theory. But do you know what? Ignore my ignorance, and I've been teaching for a long time. I've never heard of ECT one and ECT two. Is that first year and second year? Sorry, do you mind for just my nosiness, really, more than anything?
Yeah, so they've replaced the NQT, uh, newly qualified
Mm.
teacher, to a 2 year program, and now we're called early career teachers,
Yeah,
not
I
new.
knew about that. I just didn't know the one and the two. What's the
Yeah,
difference?
so
What's the
it's year one and year two. So year one is
ah?
you get 10% extra time, and then year two you get 5%, and the whole program's supposed to be a little bit different of what you do and what you focus on. Yeah.
I didn't. I just thought it was in my head. I just thought it was just a 1 year course. I didn't know that. So that's something I just learned today. I should know this. I feel like I should know this. Just a quick one. I know we are talking about theory, but how are you finding being a subject lead? I know you said you like the autonomy. Again, I'm super nosy, and being the ECT. Just yeah. How do you find that? That's a bit of a
I
wow
haven't,
thing.
yeah, I haven't like toppled under the weight of anything. I was juggling a lot of balls at once. I was confident with sociology, politics. Um, you could argue is also a specialism because I've got 2 degrees in it, but at the same time, I've never done the. I chose EdXL because you got a choice to do global politics, and I was like, well, that's my expertise, so I want to do that. That was a little bit tricky to get to terms with the different exam technique that they have to
Mm.
AQA. I do it, yeah, yeah, AQA sociology. I love. Um, so yeah, EdXL was a little bit. I'm still getting to grips with it, um, and to be honest, brushing up on a lot of that knowledge was difficult. But in terms of just being essentially the head of department, wasn't too bad. You know, there are things that I had to sort of put my foot down on because uh, I don't think I should have been expected to like provide year 12 and year 13 schemes of learning, curriculum maps, all the admin planning stuff. I just said,
Mm.
for the first year, I will go at my own pace because I'm not technically being paid for the job of head of department.
Mm.
So I said, I'll focus on, doing the lessons, blah, blah, and I'll get that done. And then in my own time, slowly, I will get there. And the SLT and the head teacher and my line manager were all completely fine with me being like that and saying that because they
Mm.
do. So it hasn't been awful, and it's a new sick form as well. I should say that it's a new sick form, so class sizes are small. Um,
So
so
yeah, a bit more manageable. So it's just
yeah,
interesting for if there's any ECTs listening to this and just thinking if they're in the sort of the same, I suppose they can sort of
mm.
message, obviously, on the Facebook group if they've got the same experience as you. But also, I suppose, inspiring that you can do those things. And obviously, like you said, it's got that autonomy as well. As I know we're here to talk about the challenge of theory. I think theory keeps on coming up a lot. We've spoken about lots of different theories and talking about how do we challenge students with theories in the past. But I think we'll just go straight on to talking about Marxism. Or the Marxisms. I think if we look at sort of the three, and maybe if we get time, dare I talk about it. I know there's been like, do we teach feminology or do we teach ethnomethodology or so on? But Marxisms, obviously we're sociology teachers. We've got a lot of non-specialists as well. I know that you said like Marxist feminism is one of your specialisms. How do you go about teaching? Do you go in straight off and go, right, these are the Marxisms, or do you just go in with Marxism generally, or do you teach some of it? Just interested in how you go about it. Selfishly, I'd love to know as well.
Yeah. I with some of the harder things, like the more niche theories, I try to drop seeds at the beginning, rather than just going, because I know some teachers go straight into theory. Like that's the first topic they do is, right, here are the theoretical perspectives that we go over in sociology, and then they start education or family. I start with families, and it's relatively easy to start thinking of those theoretical links, especially, for instance, when it comes to Marxist feminism. So I usually start by providing sort of the extra reading materials, which is both for just feminist literature as well and Marxist feminist, because in families and households, probably the easiest theory to use is feminism. So I'm dropping seeds there, and it's the same in education as well. The actual where I do it explicitly is I do theories and methods. Do it at the end of year 12. I didn't manage to finish it this year at the end of year 12 because of disruption, and loads of things took hours and hours and hours away from me. So at the moment, for my current cohort, it's going to be the bridge between year 12 and year 13. So we're going to get back and actually start functions and feminism, Marxism, social action theories, etc.
So you're going to do the theories of the bridge between year 12 and 13.
Yeah, which I think, because they already know symbolic interactionism, they've done Beck and Giddens, and then obviously they've gone over Marxism, feminism, and functionalism. Those seeds are already in their head. They have a lot of I always forget the pedagogical terms that teachers use. You know what I mean? Like the pieces of knowledge are in there. So when we get to like, right, here is it in depth, hopefully it's going to be easier for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you do it that way? Because I'm not suggesting there's a good way or a bad way. I'm just playing devil's advocate, really, more than anything. So, like, rather than sort of, I don't know, like you said, a lot of teachers go with the theory first, and go in and teach like Marxism, feminism, and so on. Then, and maybe even some teachers. It'd be interesting if, like, when we do release this, if anyone puts into the Facebook page of how they do it. But why do you do the drip drip effect rather than like, okay, here are the theories, here's Marxism, neo-Marxism, classical Marxism, structuration Marxism, talking about just like classic, like humanistic Marxism, and scientific. Why would you not do that at the beginning? And why do you do a drip drip effect that way, and then bring in the 12-13 element of it?
Truthfully, it's just because that's the way I've done it. Because obviously, I don't have wealth of experience, but I did train at 3 different schools. I was at 3 different schools when I trained, and it was just going through. Essentially, they all did it similar to how I do it. But going forward, because I've got sociology and politics, I inadvertently did a bit of a test, not consciously, but with politics, I started with the political theory, and it didn't go very well. Pedagogically, you could say that it should work well because you're sort of laying the basis of a schema. And when you go forward, you can make all these links back. That was actually, I wouldn't say a disaster, but you have to have a high proportion of what are they called now?
Content.
No, I mean like the kids themselves have to be quite intelligent to get it quite easily. And the reason, so one of the reasons why I start families and households and not education is because I find families and households a better segue into sociology, the
Mm.
sociological way of thinking, etc. And because it's obviously in paper two and the grades, not the grades, like the 10 markers, it's a good way to introduce them to exam technique. And I feel like it gets harder as you go on, like childhood and demography or family diversity are at the end, and you start very simply with like couples. So I've just found it sort of naturally through doing it that way, and obviously the two opposing subjects having the two opposing ways of doing it. I've just found that it's been less taxing on children's minds to sort of put the seeds in and learn it contextually, and then wrap it up later on. Yeah.
And there is no formula, is there? That's the whole thing. And there's not a right or wrong at all. Like I think there's lots of ways that people do. I mean, I know I've heard of some schools doing the year 13 first. I think I can't remember. Like maybe teaching the options paper two first, and then
Right.
teach it. Education. I'm trying to think about different ways that people do it. I know that people start with a lot of people do the equivalent, which is cultural identity first, because there's a lot of theory in that, and that then builds them up with topics like socialisation and stuff that are in that, and then they build into the education. I know that some schools do. I've like spoken to people where they do have a theory lesson, like especially if you've got like a one teacher, like say if you've got a 9-8 split over a fortnight. Not 9-8, that's a lie. 8-1 split over a fortnight. So you've got 9 lessons for argument's sake. And that one teacher does theory all the way through. So there's lots of different, I suppose it all depends on what your teacher makeup of your team is and their expertise. And I think, like you said, that's really important that the theory in your head as a teacher and as someone that's maybe taken a degree in sociology or a related degree, that it makes sense to start with the theory and then go into the context. But the kids haven't got that. So sometimes they need that, I don't know, those concrete examples to go in and apply the abstract. Obviously, looking at and say, like, sticking with Marxism before we look at structuration, do you feel that all the types of Marxisms need to be taught? I know that you've, like you said yourself, you haven't got you've sort of experienced in this for the first couple of years of stuff. Do you feel that, like, obviously you've mentioned neo-Marxism and you've mentioned Marxist feminisms. How do you feel about the other Marxisms?
Um, Sort of, I'd say personally, I think it's good to do it. And it's good for the kids that want to be challenged to be able to have those like theoretical nuances in their work and in themselves, in their opinions and whatnot. Um, and then therefore, I think so. The school I'm at is all about teach from the top, and I'm sure that is like a
Mm.
general school thing. Um, so you can't just pick and choose. Okay, you're going to learn the three Marxisms. So I am going to teach the three in the well, at least in the textbook. I'm sure they're in the syllabus. Humanist, structural, and orthodox, or what I call orthodox. I don't think it actually
Mm.
calls it orthodox Marxism, but the traditional, or what we conceive as Marx, because there's a debate in Marxism about what do they call it, young and old Marx. Have you ever heard of
Mm.
that? Yeah.
I've heard a little
Obviously,
bit about it, like his sort
yeah,
of philosophy changes over time. Yeah.
yeah. He sort of builds into this more what people do think is like economic determinism, and his younger self was more humanist. But then, like my tutors at university would say, "Ah, oh, that's a load of waffle. You just have to like look between the lines." Or he's still like sort of humanist because how do you think the revolution is going to happen? Of course, it's through working class agency. Blah blah blah. So I think it is important. And then there's loads of wider reading around that. For example, Lenin wrote a ridiculous amount on how to do that exactly. And then, yeah, Althusser, I think for some reason, it might be just because it's, what's the term? It's not an acronym, abbreviated. Um, Repressive state apparatus and ideological state apparatus. Every kids know that for some reason. Every
Mm.
cohort that I've been in, they get it. they get it really well and they remember it, and it just makes sense. I don't know why yet,
Yeah,
but it makes.
I found the same in my whole, which I thought they would find quite abstract, particularly the ideological separators. I thought they might find, whereas oppressive, I thought they might get that a bit more because it's again, but yeah, they seem to get that, and the concept of relative autonomy and false consciousness, they seem to get it.
Yeah,
But then I think when I think back to myself as a student, I got that as well quite quickly, so that might be why.
yeah. I think kids see that's the thing as well, that I don't know if like pedagogically it's sound, but I do think when it comes to like humanist Marxism, for example, um, kids do get a little bit scared with it because of like, well, this head I call it hegemony. Some people call it hegemony, which sounds horrible to me, but hegemony, they find it quite difficult to understand. I haven't come across any problems with them understanding the consent and coercion, because I think I can explain that quite well, and I think most people can, because we all have, for example, economic compulsions. Um, we have impulses, and we are compelled to do things without a gun pointing to our head, that we can blame on capitalism. So yeah, they have a better time with that. And there's a lot of you could say synoptic between, I guess, if the school does philosophy and ethics, or if someone did GCSE in philosophy or religious studies, the argument between structural Marxism and humanist Marxism on free will. That's quite a good introduction, and there's a lot of well, one of the new atheists, a guy called Sam Harris, wrote a book on free will, which some, because I know like Jordan Peterson's becoming quite big and that sort of vein. I think even Richard Dawkins is having like a comeback in the media. So that could be something to segue into Marxism. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think, like you said, it's when how you introduce it. And I think it's been consistent. I feel like I find what I tend to do, and again, I think I make sure they understand what Marxism is first, because obviously there's, I think even sort of from the early stages in year 12, I find that some students, particularly when they look at education, if they're the sort of struggling with that concept, they could easily confuse Marxism and functionalism because they talk about the same stuff, but obviously from different
Yeah.
angles. So I think even before I start bringing in neo-Marxism, humanistic Marxism, I just need to know that they're very different from functionalism from the first front. But then once they've grasped that, I then go, there are nuances, they're Marxisms, and we will
Mhm.
explore them as I do a bit like you do. I do a drip drip effect, so making sure that they're aware of them, but don't make a sort of a full in-depth lesson until they've got, like you said, those sort of
Yeah.
examples in their head. And I do introduce like Marxist feminism, neo-Marxism, and
Mm.
sort of like, so what you refer to as your orthodox or your classical Marxism as an
Mm.
idea. And then when I do the theory bit, like, and I do it funny enough the same time as you, I'm not saying it's the right way, I do it at that time. I then bring in the theories. We spend like ages on each of those theories again, but Marxisms, and then I go into like structure versus action and talk about that in a bit more detail. But I find by that they've got that wealth of knowledge that they can apply it to. But I don't go to, oh, by the way, everything you've learned about Marxism isn't true. I just go, oh, there are nuances within that, and mention a few of them, but not all of the complexities. Because I think at that stage in year 12, those students are just getting their head around like the multiple of theories. I'm sure that other teachers might do it differently, and I don't think there's a wrong way. And I'd love to hear from teachers that do it differently, and that I'd love to hear from teachers that start off their first part of their course and go into all the Marxisms, and go into, the depth of the variety of debates. I try and keep them quite clear cut at that point, but I'm sure that people do it differently.
Mm.
Structuration, and we've talked about that a little bit. How do you go about teaching the structure action debate?
Just when I'm going over social action theories, um, I think it's only then that I speak about like the structure versus agency debate, the seeds in earlier on, especially when going over things like functionalism and Marxism, just to sort of like evaluate the whole determinism of the two. But yeah, I don't think structuration is like you would spend as much time as it on even say um, phenomenology, to be honest, or ethnomethodology, or was it the dramaturgical,
Surgical.
yeah, dramaturgical model. Those are things that are, they might do all three in one lesson, but yeah, it's just not something that's really come up, and maybe that is because it isn't something that maybe it's undervalued. I'm unsure, but
I think again, I think it's like you said, we talk about teaching to the top and adaptive learning. And that's the thing in education at the moment. And you don't say to students, right, I'm only going to teach you structure and action, and you guys are teach
yeah,
structuration. But I also think it's knowing your cohort of students, and if some of those students are really finding it hard to get their heads around structure versus action, then you don't want to keep on. It's knowing your class. I think that's what it comes
mhm.
down to. And if they're not crossing that debate, then it's like building up. Then you might allude to structure and action
Yeah,
to those students, but obviously the core thing is they know those debates as well. And I do think there's certain topics. I think I've spoken this before. I think there's certain topics that lend themselves better to certain debates. So, for example, I know that. For example, my own experience, cultural identity really helps you get into that structure versus action debate quite early on. Um, and I think I think it's like drip effect that you've mentioned earlier, and making sure that that's taught. I know, like again, going back to my last thing I want to talk about, which is feminology and ethnomethodology. I did notice. And it's not like I'm sort of weird voyeur of the Facebook chat, but there were sort of messages on the chat around just before exam times, like, have we taught this? We've got two weeks to go. Do we teach? Do we not? I think you just mentioned you sort of do it in a couple of lessons. Do you do that as part of theory and methods, or how do you go about teaching those debates?
yeah. So that's in theory and methods, and again, it was I can't. It's frustrating because I can't recall exactly my. See, this is again my first year experience. One of the things, because I brought up phenomenology and ethnomethodology in families and households. Well, not in families and households, but that's where I was in the scheme of learning. I did a lesson on social facts, but unfortunately I can't remember why I chose to do it there. But the easiest introduction to it was through the I can't remember the sociologist names, but it's the study on is the evaluations on Durkheim's suicide study,
Mm-hmm.
and um, social constructions is one of the first big concepts that um, we have in sociology, I think, especially in families and households. Um, so phenomenology is all about pretty much everything as a social is a construction of our mind, and they might. Well, I always say, just imagine that these phenomenologists or even postmodernists, they're essentially sociologists that are hippie, right? And they've been on the fields and they're all a bit maybe they're tripping on acid or something. You have to think about it like that, right? Everything around us, nothing is objective. This is a table is because I think it's a table. Um, and then you attach that to Durkheim's, and they understood it. Like, how do you know? I think it was about the coroner deciding whether something is a death or a suicide. Um, that was, I think some of them struggled with it for a bit, um, but they did get it. And then ethnomethodology is, to my understanding, it's like it's a strand of phenomenology, like the child of it, just looking at how we construct reality uh, in our everyday lives. And I don't teach beliefs, but so the biggest piece of advice I would give teachers really is to read. And I know a lot of teachers struggle to find time with that, but I read a lot, and it's very helpful because I always feel like I'm I don't mean to, but I'm 10 steps ahead of the kids in terms of the theory. And through teaching, for example, families and households, I went back to a lot of the feminist literature that I read at university. Um, and I think that's generally how it goes. When I was doing education, I started looking at stuff on academies. So if I was doing beliefs, um, the one thing there's a lot of conversation around, because obviously one of the big things right now is the rise of Islam, and one of the biggest I guess, intellectual hurdles with Islam and the West is language, because Arabic is such a complex language, compared to English, especially when it's translated and transliterated. There's a lot can be lost in language, and we cannot maybe understand certain things because of our limited language, or at least the translations. Um, and that is a big thing that ethnomethodologists or ethnomethodology looks at, is how language constructs our social reality. And Noam Chomsky and Slavoj Žižek, which are two quite prominent theorists, I don't know what they're called, they talk a lot about language. And so, Slavoj Žižek is quite a bumbling character, and people, like to listen to him. And Noam Chomsky is just, I think, a lot of people interested in politics and sociology and philosophy have read at least one Noam Chomsky book. So I think challenging students with that, or even just yourself as a teacher, I think is always helpful. And I don't think, to sum up this little segue, I don't think phenomenology or ethnomethodology is anything to be scared of. They're just big words. They're horrible words that no one knows how to spell or sometimes even say, but it's fine. I think you just have to be a couple steps ahead of the kids, and generally,
Yeah. And I think, like you said, I think that sort of a thread that's come all the way through is, I think with the thing with sociology, as teachers, like, I think it's great that you are an ECT talking, because I think there's going to be lots of ECTs that are going to be listening to this and thinking, right, well, this is my experience from someone that's my second year of my ECT, is thinking, actually, it's not something you teach once. Like you said about when you taught social facts, it's sometimes naturally there's points in the, especially if you're a listener now and you're listening to this and this is your first year of teaching, there will be natural points. So you might do a scheme of work, but there'll be natural points that may come earlier or later than when you've planned to say, look at social facts. That you think, actually, this is a really nice time to mention this. So, like, for example, you talked about family. I might introduce it when I'm looking at, I don't know, statistics in education, for argument's sake. It might be a natural time to bring that in, and that might be something I haven't planned for. And I think that's the case with sociology. If it feels like the students are getting it and you're gauging their learning through assessment, then actually it might be an idea to drop it in then obviously you teach it properly when you've planned to teach it. And then, of course, with sociology, I think it's revisited again and again and again and again. And I think that's something, if you're listening to this and you're a teacher new to teaching, you're in your first year, or you're going to go into your first year of teaching, don't be scared that the students didn't get it the first time round, because there's going to be lots of learning opportunities for that throughout the year. Because once, like you said, you've drip effect it. How many drips? I don't know how many drips I've said there, but they're going to revisit it again and again and again. And weirdly, I think one of the benefits of sociology is everything is revisited. So it's not like you're learning something new and then you're learning something new again and you're learning something new again and you've just got lots of stuff to remember. It's building on the last stuff and the last stuff and the last stuff. So I think that's something comforting. I think there isn't a perfect way. Now, I know, I mean, I'm a teacher that taught for more years than I'd like to say, and I don't think I teach the scheme of work the same time every year. And I still revamp my resources each year. And every year I feel like a new teacher. Because each student's coming with a different life course themselves. So, like, if I've got a mixture of politics students and RS students and some geographers, their knowledge base will be very different to, say, if I, for example, have some maths students, some science students. I'm trying to think of another something like that. An economics student, and so they're sort of melting pot of their own experiences and their own life will bring something different to the lessons as well, and also what's going on in the world. I think sometimes that happens, doesn't it, as well? Like you said, like, you don't know why you brought that up. That, I think you were talking about social facts. I don't know why you brought that up at that time, but there might be something going on in the news that then lended itself to that discussion at that time. Next year's going to be interesting as well, isn't it? From a politics point of view. Yeah. So again, we can't avoid that. And there'll be points when it might be apt to refer to certain theories because they're having lively debate at that time, or there's certain things that could happen that we could nicely chew into our lessons. So it's nice to unpick these ideas. And I think, some people, I think the word you mentioned was frightened. And I think some some of us do get frightened. Particularly, I think I know I do it. I think sort of around March, April time, I go back over the skin work for the 100th time. I've known, and this is full like I don't know, confession here. I've gone to bed, and I'm not recommending this for anyone because I want life balance is so important. But I get this panic, and I think, oh no, I just want to go and just check skin work at 1 o'clock in the morning just to double check that I have taught anything. I don't know why I do it because I just know I just think it's something, and I think, oh, if I don't check it, then I won't be able to get sleep because I'll be thinking, have I not? Is everything covered? And I think, like you said, I think it's something we all do. We have these worries about certain things, and that's healthy, but obviously you don't want it to like have an impact on your personal life as well. But reading is important for sure. So definitely. Actually, I'm reading Presentation of Everyday Self. That's my sort of summer read. I bought that cheap off a secondhand website. So yeah, I've set that as a reading challenge for my students. So I hope I'm not the only one reading. I hope they've read it as well. So yeah, it's good to read for sure.
So because I just read a book, what's it called? The Bible, Quran, and Modern Science, and it's a really interesting book. And it's one I've seen it on the sociology chat. That some people are like ditching beliefs in society because they don't find it as, maybe kids don't like it or they don't think it's as relevant. And I'm going to be I've taught beliefs in society in a previous school. I'm going to be doing global development, and I think that's always going to be relevant. But I defended beliefs on the chat, and I was just like, no, like around the world right now, religion is like becoming an increasingly important thing. And sometimes I wish that I could teach beliefs next year. But yeah, that was a really interesting book.
Yeah, it's definitely keeping our passion for sociology alive for sure. It's really, really important. So I'm gonna let you go, but thank you for your time. I appreciate that, and it's good to sort of have those discussions, those debates. I'd love to hear when people do get around to listening to this, what they're doing and how they teach the theories, because there isn't one way. There's lots of different ways, and I'd love to hear people's views. So once you listen to it, do write on the Facebook page or get in touch. It'd be lovely to find out. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You take care. Bye bye.
Angie, bye bye.